We're talking today with Rabbi Leib Tropper, and the subject is our responsibility to listen to the Torah through the voice of our Torah scholars. Is there a mandate for us to actually listen to what we would call Daas Torah, an actual obligation to do so?
That's a loaded question that has been in controversy not 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but most recently with people challenging the topic, the concept of a Daas Torah and the authority of a Daas Torah and how it affects us. The voice of dissent regarding Daas Torah, the Mishnah says clearly in Pirkei Avos, obviously it says one of the 48 ways you acquire Torah is through emunas chachamim. And the Chazon Ish has an interpretation for that, which we're not going to go into right now. But the concept of emunas chachamim is expressed in Avos Reb Nosson, which is part of Daas Torah, that anybody who listens to the wise men, einoi nichshal, will not be the Talmud Chacham, and not just any wise man, but any person who listens to a Chacham and Gadol b'Torah is einoi nichshal, as it says in Avos Reb Nosson. And then there are more contemporary and earlier achronim that talk about this and challenge the dissension. People say, well, Daas Torah is, but what do they know about the advice about what kind of neighborhood to live in, or what kind of investment I should make in my money? You hear that, I'm sure, all the time. Daas Torah only applies to halacha, and that voice of dissension is really it's undermining the Torah itself. We've heard this many times from Rabbi Gifta, Zechayna Levracha, Rosh Yeshiva of Telz, speak about those who challenge the concept of Daas Torah are undermining more than just Daas Torah. The consequences are very severe in terms of our children, how they respect Daas Torah, respect the authority of Torah. Our children, our neighbors, our friends, who are not necessarily people sitting and learning. It is really has tragic consequences. But let's just talk about some of the sources. I don't have all the sources, obviously, but we have to be really, so to speak, just be very blunt and clear about this, so we have understand who we're talking about when we challenge this concept of Daas Torah. I don't mean contemporary Daas Torah alone. Let's start from way back. When people say certain things about the Chazal, those people who are challenging the Chazal or applying the Chazal to limited space in life are talking about people who the Medrash says about Amoraim, that they call it the smallest Amora. I don't mean smallest in height or any other way other than in, he wasn't considered the biggest Amora, the most respected Amora in the world. The smallest Amora was able to be Mechayim Mesim, was able to resurrect the dead. He had so strong kesher with the Bari Olam, that the Bari Olam gifted him with this talent of being able to resurrect the dead. So here we're talking about these great people versus some, professor or some who challenges it because if he found some kind of whatever archaic piece of stone or laundry that he discovered to disprove the words of the Chazal. That's one type of. And we're not only talking about halacha, l'maisa. It's very clear. And I'm going to move ahead, fast forward this conversation, because I can never end really this conversation. This is something that needs a treatment of weeks and months and maybe even years. We'll start first with somebody, somebody goes to ask a shayla about Moshe Feinstein, the Chazal Levracha, or Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. We look up a tshuva of Moshe Feinstein. And Moshe Feinstein says that a woman who had a kedushin, a conservative kedushin, does not need a get. So he'll be very happy to find it out that he married to a woman that he never got a get from his first wife. He's very, oh, thank God, I didn't realize it. And Moshe Feinstein says it's not a problem, so it's wonderful. He'll rely on Moshe Feinstein on that. He'll rely on the Marsham for those things. So let's see what Moshe Feinstein says about Daas Torah. Let's just see. And we'll see how we react to that Moshe Feinstein, just in, juxtaposed against the way we act. Moshe Feinstein's psak on something which accommodates us. Moshe Feinstein is Darash Moshe, and I think I don't want people to trust me. I don't want you to trust me. I want people to look up themselves, and if I made a mistake, I made a mistake. I'm not going to go into the whole kashin he asks on the story about Bnei Slofchad, but he talks about that issue about Yerusha with women, and then goes into a point. And the point is what I'm going to quote and translate. V'yesh lilmoid mizeh. A person has to extract from this story. Shetzarech lishmoya gam la'atzas ha'chachamim. Not only to the halacha of ha'chachamim, but you have to listen to the eitzah of ha'chachamim, their advice. Shetzarech leida, that one has to know. She'atzosam hi derech hanochan is the appropriate way. L'tovle, for his good. V'loi rotzen atzma, it's not for the rotzen of the person who's dispensing this advice. This gadol, this great Talmud Chacham, doesn't necessarily have to, need it for himself. It may be for the taiva of the person, recipient of this advice, and not necessarily what he wants, but it may be what is best for him. These people who are giving him advice are greater Talmidei Chachamim than he is. And not just to the advice of people in Talmudic times, Rabbi Seinu HaKoidman and the early Rishonim, Ela b'chol dar v'dar, in every generation and generation, kishem shetzarich l'shmaya lepsak din, and Moshe makes this parallel, unequivocally, he makes this parallel, kishem shetzarich l'shmaya lepsak din shalahem, mishum shehem chachmei ha-Torah, because they are the wisest people of the Torah. K'moy kein tzarich l'shmaya la'atzosam b'chol inyan ve'inyan. I already put the emphasis again on b'chol inyan ve'inyan. We're supposed to listen to them in every thing, every inyan, every issue. Ki mi shaloi me Torah l'shma, the first Mishnah, right in the beginning of Perek Vav of Perkei Avos, it says, "Kol Aloi Me'Torah Lishma Nehen Mimenu Eid Zechel Dvarim Harbe," and it says all the things that a person merits when he learns Torah Lishma. And he says also, "V'Nehen Mimenu Eitzav V'Tushiyah," and people benefit from him. Positive eitzes, positive advice that really means it's like Atzas Hashem. It's the Torah of Lishma impacts his thinking, that his words, his eitzah, Hashem puts the Atzas Hashem in his words, the advice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into his words, because of his closeness to that Torah that he learned. Okay, then he says, the person who does learn Torah Lishma, so he's gifted with this power of giving people eitzah, a good eitzah, an appropriate eitzah, an effective eitzah, and he's given the bracha that he's able to lahavin heitev, to understand ma liyayitz b'inyanim gashmiyim l'tov. Even in material things, he's able to give advice because he's gifted. It's not something that he's very smart and he sharpened his kelim, his knife, or any other tool to become this wise person. It's not a chess game that Kadosh Baruch Hu sharpened his mind to use to become that Tam Chacham sharpened to be able to give eight. It's a matana because of his dveikus and Torah Lishma. So he says, "V'im einay ma'amin bozeh." If a person does not believe that that's the truth, hu chesaron gadol boy. It's a great deficit in his being. And anybody he continues and he says in concise form, he says anybody who davens every day and says Hashiva Sheftenu Kvarishayna, bring back our judges as in the past, and our advisors like in the beginning. It means that the Chachmei HaTorah, the people who are the wise men of Torah, they should be our advisors like in the beginning. That all of Klal Yisrael, Sheyedu Kol Yisrael, they have wisdom how to advise people. This is very important. Very, very important, as the Moshe writes. And you can all look it up in the Dorish Moshe. It used to be Chelik Beis in Parshas Masai. Now, those who believe in Moshe and are psaked in on wearing a small yarmulke, or a big yarmulke, or a small yarmulke, and a machlekes of Shlomo Kluger and Ramoshe, we can be making like Ramoshe, or other kinds of other psakim of Ramoshe, should also trust Ramoshe when Ramoshe makes an absolute decision of what is our responsibility towards Daas Torah, and how we should respect the Daas Torah, even on Inyanim Gashmiyim, and even on Inyanei Harishus, as Ramoshe uses, things that are not obligatory, they're optional. And you go ask your Rebbe, you think my family, what's the best yeshiva for my son? You ask, go to the Torah. But I mean, what does he know my son needs? How does he know what Hashem gives him das usvuna. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is somebody who's so attached to God, to the Eibishter, to his Torah. The Eibishter, just through IV, through kind of a spiritual IV, he knows exactly what to say. Exactly what to say. He has the nutrients called Daas Torah nutrients. And he could dispense that in accordance with the Ratzon Hashem.
Inspirational vision. Inspirational
vision, that's a good way of putting it. But we have to appreciate that, understand that, not believe that it's just something, he's so wise, therefore 1 + 1 = 2. He's so wise, and therefore he's so dovuk to Torah, he's so attached to Torah, that Kadosh Baruch Hu gifts him with Nanin Mimenu Eitza V'Toishia. That's one particular source. I want to share with you another very important source. The Heilige Radomsker Rebbe, Mamish Kodesh V'Nei Rishmai. People zitted, Leiden Leben, they zitted, they trembled mentioning his name, Radomsker Rebbe. And he wrote a sefer called Tiferes Shleima. 2 volumes, today 2 volumes, it's on Torah and on Moedim. And in Parshas B'Shalach, and the pasuk v'yashuvu v'yachanu l'fnei pi achiros, they should return and they should camp in front of pi achiros. So somehow he interjects the following, and I'm quoting this verbatim: v'shoresh emunas chachomim, and the root of emunas chachomim is lahamin b'divreihem shel tzadikei hador, to believe in the words of the tzadikei hador, the righteous of the generation. Asher ruach Hashem, the Spirit of God dwells in them, percolates within them. Anything that they're going to say or advise. Af bidovar orishus, even something which is optional. V'af kiyayma elo mipi Hashem. It's not from Hashem. It's not. It's only from the Navi's telling you that, but it's not Hashem's wisdom. Ki bozeh chacham odef minavi. A Talmud chacham, a person is wise, is odef minavi. Ki hanovi asher yedaber b'shem Hashem is talking in the name of God. Aval amunas chachamim hi amuna b'divrei hachacham atzmai. You're believing in the chachma and the chacham itself, meaning you're believing in the wisdom itself. Believing in the Navi, telling this is the word of Hashem, I believe it's the word of Hashem. Believing in a Chacham, a Talmud Chacham, as the Radomsker Rebbe says, and the way the Chazon Ish explains in general, that's believing in the Chacham, or the wisdom. Whose wisdom is it? Whose wisdom is it? It's the Eibishter's wisdom. No such thing as wisdom, spiritual wisdom, without being at the Eibishter's wisdom. We have no other spirituality other than the Rebbeinu Shalom. So Radomsker says that even Divrei Rishus coming from a Talmud Chacham, what comes from the Chacham talks only what Hashem talks. It's not telling you what Hashem said, it's telling you the words of Hashem. Afshu, and even, you go stronger than anybody, Afshu neged haseichel. Even though we challenge the person rational, but it doesn't make sense. The famous protest that we all say all the time, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. How could it be? It must mean this, and it must mean that, and it must be something that fits our small mind, our combined hubris and myopia together. Our gaiva that we understand things and we have this kind of my mind. I mean, I can understand. I mean, I should be able to interpret what's going on. I should be able to understand what to do. And my small-mindedness, my small vision. I want to interject. The Ramban writes in Bava Basra that Chachomim, in Amoraïc times for sure, they were able to see beyond what our eyes can see. That means if you see a green wall and they tell you, there's yellow in here. But the color is green, but it's yellow. I'm sorry, there's yellow in here. It means that they see something different than you see. And they were gifted with this ability. People will make fun. What is this? Superman with X-ray vision. What is this? I'll let them make fun. And it goes on. The kasher yigzar oimer kein yokum b'chol devorov gam b'divrei olam hazeh. The Radomsker Rebbe continues and says, this great Gadol says, what he decrees will also be in this world, in material things. And the eitzos for people personally, in business, that's the loshin of the Heilige Radomsker Rebbe's Chus HaYogin Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. I want to share with you the power of what we believe to be what the Gedolei Hador are. I heard this from a friend of mine who's a great Talmud Chacham, huge Talmud Yisrael, renowned Talmud Chacham. I think perhaps I may have shared with you the person who it is in Yerushalayim. He's well known. He's mamish Baki and all of Jewish Bikiveg inside and out besides his Bikis and Shas. And he says the following. He said to me the following ones. He said, I asked him a question, and Moshe Feinstein, in one of his tshuvas, talks about 102 degrees on the thermometer. A child is called Sakanas Nefashis Emchal Shabbos. So a doctor was sitting with me and telling me, Rabbi Leib, I was right next to this Rav, Talmud Chacham, saying, but Rabbi Leib, that's not, from a medical standpoint, that's not true. Medicine would disagree with that. 102 is Pekuach Nefesh. So this younger man, at that time he was a younger man, jumps and says, you're right. It was not Pekuach Nefesh until Moshe said it is. When Moshe said it is, it became Pekuach Nefesh. What does that mean? So we masber even with another hesber that I saw in the Tzutzi or Hameir from the Helika Goin of Lublin, Rosh Yeshiva of Lublin, Rameir Shapiro. The Gemara says in the end of Sanhedrin, Rabbi Kiva. Kiva says, Dor HaMidbar ein lahem chelek lo'olam haba. Generation of the Midbar was over 1,000 years before Rabbi Kiva. Do not have a share in the world to come. Kara Olav Rebbe said about Rameir. Shafki Rabbi Kiva lachassidusei. Rabbi Kiva abandoned his righteousness. What does that mean? Abandoned his righteousness? That became a Chal Shabbos. Chalila. Chas Melazker, Arful and Pume. Dust to the mouth who would utter such words, Rabbi Kiva. What does it mean? Shafke Rabbi Kiva lachassidusei, he abandoned righteousness. It means, Rashi says, Shahayarogil lelamed schus al Yisrael. He always would respect human life and melamed schus on Klal Yisrael. Always would Rabbi Kiva do that. So, Rameir Shapiro asks the question, first of all, why was Rebbe angry, so upset with Rabbi Kiva, saying that Dor HaMidbar Eilam Chelek Lam Haba? That was 1,000 years before. Whatever they were put, they were put. If they were put in Gehenna, they were in Gehenna. So all Rabbi Kiva was saying was, Dor HaMidbar went to Gehenna. They did not go to Gan Eden. So what's so terrible? What did he say wrong? So Rameir Shapiro says, the Goin for Lublin says, that's not what the Chazal mean. The Chazal mean, when Rabbi Kiva said, Dor HaMidbar Eilam Chelek La'olam Haba, that no share in the world to come, even if they were in Gan Eden, the power of Rabbi Kiva's words, if they impacted their status is going from Gan Eden to Achmon Islam, the opposite of Gan Eden. That's the power of the great words of a Tana, of the words of a great Rishon, of the words of a great Achrein, that lives in sanctity and purity and greatness in studying Torah day and night and day. Yisrael v'araisa v'kutsha brichel charu. They're all one, and if they're all one, the powers are all one. But for some hidden, either psychological or some other reasons, there's a barrier created between us and that ability to accept the concept of Daas Torah. I just want to share and maybe end this particular segment of this section, which needs much more chizuk, and myself included, of course. I said to you that, Rabbi Leib Tropper in the second chelik or third chelik, I'm not sure exactly, I would say, writes as follows. He writes that he asked a question to one of his Talmidim. Who is going to be the Shofet Kol Haaretz? Who's in the Yom Hadin HaGodol V'Hanor, when people's neshamas go to the Kisei HaKavod? It's 120 years. Who will sit in judgment for what happens to Peretz Eichler, to Leib Tropper, to everybody around us? Who will be sitting in judgment? So I know that you right away got scared, and you said to me, you're bringing this kind of intense mortality in front of me, and I'm going to get nervous. Is that what you made, that kind of remark? But Rabbi Leib Tropper says that when Shosalanta was nifta, one of his favorite Talmidim, of Kelm, was maspid him, eulogized him. And in the eulogy that he said on his Rebbe Shosalanta, he said as follows. He says, I have a Kabbalah from Rebbe Shosalanta, received it from Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, received it from the Goyen, I think, that in Olam Haba, the ones who will be judging you are the ones who lived in this generation. They could take everything you've done, everything I've done, everything anybody's done, that was, God forbid, not necessarily the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and justify it with the power of Torah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will paskin with them. That's the power of the Chachamim. Clearly, we did a violation. Clearly, we did something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not happy with. But their ability to be done, the kafschus for us, changes the facts of what happened. That is the power of these Chacham, this Daas Torah. This is just a start, parents. You know that this is a topic that really needs extensive, because if I was here, I know I'd have thousands of questions, and I'm not sure I could answer all the questions. I'm just somebody who's being asked to speak on about a certain topic, and I'm sharing a little bit about it, and I have notes, I'm finishing almost a whole notebook on this topic. Some people like to know sometimes. It's fun. It's not a joke, but it's kind of a tragic joke. It's like, but where does it say this in halacha? What does it say this in halacha? What does it say this? And I cannot say that to them. But Rabbi Shivra Hutner Zatzal used to sometimes get frustrated when people ask questions on the obvious. But where does it say in halacha? Where does it say in Shulchan Aruch? So he would say to them, his retort was, what does it say in the Shulchan Aruch that you can't daven in Shemini Esrei with a cat on your head? What does it say in Shulchan Aruch? Does it say in Shulchan Aruch you can't daven with a cat on your head? Doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch you can't daven with a cat on your head. So, in other words, I guess you didn't get the message. That some things, if you have a Ramosha Feinstein taking a chrayis for something, if you have the Radomsker Rebbe taking a chrayis for something, if you have Rabbi Leib Tropper taking a chrayis for something, if you have people like that taking a chrayis, what could we say? And I end off with the words of the Chazon Ish. And these words of the Chazon Ish, I hope, it's not meant to intimidate anyone, but it's meant for what it says. In the English Chazon Ish that was printed in 3 Chalakim is the following words. Hashita, this approach, this shita, this derech, la'asais es ha-Torah l'chalakim shainim, to make a dichotomy of the Torah. Hira be'isavaheta, a psak al isavaheta, treif, kasher, muta, asur, chayiv, pater, whatever it may be. That is one chelik of Torah. V'hira b'shuk hachayim, and giving a direction in life, not halacha, but in life. chelet sheni, that's a separate issue. And that gives us, God forbid, someone the excuse. Liyos nichnoim, they will abide and they will sublimate themselves to the words of the Chachamim. In halacha. But they'll look for some other kind of books or things in regard to the second part, l'shuk hachayim, things that are related to the marketplace environment, or the things that are just about advice, about generic advice in life. They'll look in the books and in the self-help sections in the Barnes and Noble or whatever it may be. He ashita, this is right. That is the shita. That is the derech, hayeshana, the old derech of those in Judaism in Ashkenaz, the Jews in Germany. Asher hidichu as Am Yisrael, who pushed away Klal Yisrael from doing mitzvahs. They convinced them to go off the derech of Yiddishkeit by making two separate Torahs. The Torahs halacha be'isser, isser be'heter, one you ask the Rav. When it comes to everything else, you ask your science section in Barnes & Noble, your self-help section in Barnes & Noble, which is also Narishkeit. The only self-help book anywhere that works is a thing called Tehillim, as a self-help book. It works. It's not a book to say for HaKadosh to David HaMelech. There's no other self-help book that really works in this. Now, the Chazal do say Chochma B'Goyim Tamin, so I'm not saying it cannot work, but the one you could trust is the Tehillim. Chochma B'Goyim Tamin does not mean that it's Torah. It doesn't mean it's infallible. It's Chochma, and Chochma can be fallible. Torah cannot be infallible. Torah is infallible. So I leave you with these thoughts, and all of us, I think I heard many times from a Rosh Yeshiva here in New York how much chizuk in that emunah would do for Klal Yisrael collectively and individually. Because there are a lot of people with big yarmulkes and who look like B'nai Torah, act like B'nai Torah, smell like B'nai Torah, and talk like B'nai Torah. But in this area, there is a very big problem understanding what Daas Torah is. Maybe there are people who disagree with this. Maybe there are Gedolim. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. I'm familiar with the Gedolim who are Makubal, who are accepted by Klal Yisrael. Chazanish, Ramosha, we all know, was accepted. Everybody ran to Ramosha. If any kind of heter they needed, they went to Ramosha. And even people who had Ramosha had certain chomis as well. But we all listened to Ramosha's psak was like Daas Torah. That was the final word. And of course the Helike the Tver Shleima, the Domske Rebbe, Mamish Kodesh V'ner Shmoi, we could trust them. We could bank on them. We could live like them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Leib Tropper, for helping us to understand responsibility, to listen and benefit from Daas Torah.
Thank you, Bert.